Good morning, everybody. As promised, in this final panel, we really want to talk about where things go from here, not just for Culture Summit, but for all of the collaborations that can take place in this room. One of the central collaborations, obviously, is the one between DCT and TCP Ventures and the Rothkopf Group. And each of us have our own plans and agendas and futures that we've got in mind. So we look at this as our individual organizations and then as in partnership. But also, many partnerships and collaborations have grown up in and around this meeting. And so part of the idea here is to surface some ideas that either our individual organizations might pursue, we might pursue together, or some of you might pursue, or we might all pursue together with an idea towards what's necessary and what's urgent. And one of the things we'd like to do is also sort of take stock. The difference between this year's Culture Summit and last year's Culture Summit was quite substantial in a lot of ways. We've had more people here, we've had more countries represented here, we've had more unique collaborations created here, we've had art created exclusively for the event, we've had a whole series of media partnerships that have increased the impact of the event. We have the partnership with Stanford, we have a bunch of other institutional partnerships that we have been developing associated with this to be able to carry things forward. And so in that way, it's been quite rich. And of course, we had the great experience at NYU Abu Dhabi with the orchestra, which was a major thing and something new. We had a fantastic visit yesterday at the Louvre, which again was something new. So it's a much richer array of people and ideas and music and art, theater, film, institutional partners, and so forth. But it's just scratching the surface. And so what we want to do is we want to talk about some ideas that came out of the discussion, and then talk about just our general view of where things are going culturally and within each of our orbits, and see if we can have something productive. And then at the very end, Saif is going to play the violin. No.
That's right.
Or alternatively, instead of Saif, we will have Gidon Kremer, one of the greatest violinists in the world, play the violin. One of them will play the violin at the very end of this, and that will give us a great conclusion, and we will move on to our lunch. But what I thought we would do, because I think it'd be useful for these guys to hear sort of a little bit of the substantive output, is to talk and present some of the outcomes of some of these workshops. Everybody's been briefed to sort of keep it to a minute or two of sort of highlights and specific ideas. We've heard some from the artist incubators. And I don't know exactly where everybody's sitting, so I'm going to just go down the list and holler out. There is Lori. Lori's first. That's the way it goes. So Lori Fitzpagato, here's a microphone.
Okay.
And give it a shot.
All right. 1 second. I didn't know it was first, so I need to at least pull up my notes. Which is not, okay, here we go. All right, our workshop focused on the issue, the original title was...
Keep the technology you're speaking into closer to your mouth when you're reading from.
Sorry. Report on Arts Education for Marginalized and At-Risk Communities. And we had representatives from about 12 countries. We also had about 12 professions. So everything ranging from teachers to artists to managers, et cetera. We had about 20 people the first day, and the second day about 12. We focused a great deal the first day on semantics because we think language is very important. And in terms of the selected title of naming it Marginalized and At Risk, which had been a struggle originally, because the original title was underprivileged, I think, which I kind of screamed at from afar, and it was switched to marginalized. And then there are also all kinds of terminology, including underrepresented, this, under that. And we really felt that the semantics of this was important. So we spent time in trying to come up with a new way to refer to these communities. And we came up with one. And our selected reference to these communities became Arts Education for Communities of Risk and Resilience. Because resilience is a positive term, and these are communities that are often challenged, threatened. They are at risk, but they're also resilient. So that was the title we came up with. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights says the principle of cultural equity, as expressed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, centers and makes imperative the discourse: all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. Everyone has the right freely to participate in the cultural life of the community, to enjoy the arts, and to share in scientific advancement and its benefits. We found that very relevant, and we came up with 6 recommendations. Our recommendations to Cultural Summit 2018, and we ask that it be considered for adoption by all and participation by all at various dimensions and levels of interest, would be to educate governments, decision makers, public media, to value arts as part of the core curriculum in all levels of schools, universities, life. 2, to utilize case studies, available data, and metrics to advocate for adopting arts into core curriculum. 3, to empower civil society to support financially, legally, politically, socially these communities of risk and resilience. 4, to integrate art into core curriculum. Using as an example Doris's wonderful program, which is Pretext, to see if that could be applicable across the board in various countries as a pilot, and then to look at other existing programs instead of recreating the wheel. Next, to create and collaborate with existing institutions to ensure sustainability of programs to support these goals. And lastly, to build networks, technology networks, and to identify acceptable interlocutors. Maybe they're South-South instead of North-South. Maybe they're East. Maybe it's not having the West be the interlocutor with the South or the East. So finding what interlocutor might work better and have more resonant messages and more acceptable to those with whom we're speaking.
Thank you, ma'am. Those are clearly very important points, and they resonate with what came out of the artist workshops as well. I think there is a great sense that there can be, using some basic technological tools, platforms, and so forth, the ability to connect artists in need, whether it's artists in education, whether it's artists in presenting organizations, whether it's artists and organizations that could use the artists to help them raise money, and that simply matching, simply using something that is available in most technologies could have a profound global effect, and it's not an expensive option. In keeping with the diversity of the groups that we have here, we've gone now from one very senior former US government official to Mohamed, who is a presenter in Norway.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Carla, for having us. So our group was actually very small to report on that, but we were still very diversely represented, and we actually went quite hands-on on actual kind of recommendations. So something we've heard earlier this morning in the Artist Incubator output, we kind of actually played with the idea. Our group was arts education and cultural preservation, and we were thinking, mainly discussing the idea between the global and local context, and how we always say that the art is global, the audiences are local, but then we had a very interesting example that basically a local issue actually does not resonate in the local environment, but is a global, it has a global audience, so kind of a very reverse order. So this background play between the local and global was something that we basically took as a starting point. So we actually came with a little idea about how to do two levels of a project, which on the first would be a grassroots initiative, trying to basically use the power of social media, which we've seen in many cases. So we actually named it, well, hashtag endangered culture, with a kind of a question of where is culture at risk. So basically trying to create a very simple platform which does not cost an investment. Which does not cost an investment, but is a platform where everyone can basically post a picture of a craftsmanship, make a video of a tune, name it what, something that that is at risk, that doesn't actually, is not going to be preserved, that it's going to disappear one way or another. Create a platform and basically make it a very grassroots initiative, non-regulated at first stage. Then eventually translating that into kind of grassroots initiative into a systemized organization, or let's say structure, trying to basically combine stakeholders which are could range from UNESCO to UN to arts councils, ministries of cultures, media. Actually, we had a very interesting example from Italy where a very kind of non-traditional example where a very commercial media station, TV station, actually approached the project and made a big feature on it. So basically combining the stakeholders and trying to lift up the basically non-filtered initiative initially, and building a structure. So the idea behind an actual organization at a later stage would be that based on all the input on the endangered cultures, let it be music, let it be craftsmanship, whatever, would be an inspiration for, let's say, 20 commissions per year for artists who would use basically this either Instagram or Twitter account to just look and be inspired. And based on that input, create the art, be commissioned to create an artistic project which can be cross-disciplinary, which eventually is presented, is disseminated to a broader audiences and is creating awareness and actually has a very strong educational component.
Thank you. No, and I think that's, again, it ties into a number of the themes that we saw here from Jimmy Nelson's work, where he's dealing with endangered cultures. I know Carla's organization and my organization both are doing things now focusing on endangered cultures, where we're treating them much as people treat endangered species, where we're trying to find ways to preserve those cultures. Christy.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Carla. Thanks, everyone. Our group was really tasked to look into the ideas of education and cultural preservation. Again, with semantics, I won't go into it too much, but we decided that there was, we were getting preoccupied by wordsmithing when we talked about preservation. So we went to the instinctual, more intuitive landscape where the word protection came in, and it allowed us to be more porous and have mobility with our thoughts. Protection, not in a cultural protection, not in the sense of paternalistic controls, but in terms of the spirit of removing the icebergs and removing and reducing the obstacles in our own generation and time to ensure that the protection of another generation in time has access to their own fluidity and liberties. Okay, so education was for us obviously the highest possible priority across lines of equity. And that education, whether it be through an artist, through an institution, or through education systems, that it need to be dimensional, that it needs to reflect the dimensional multiplicity of stories and histories as a kind of bedrock. And I'll go into that briefly further. We also talked about the importance of artists and arts organizations as a tool. We're more than willing to be used as a tool in art and culture. And artists were, for us, really important to the idea of linkage and making bridges. And I would say, in probably my own language, it's a way of not just the establishment of where the notes are, but the artist is the one who can perceive the space between. And it's the intelligence and perception of the space between the notes that actually allows us to have more in perspective. So, in terms of protection, this includes artists. If artists are to be connectors and to be able to be fluid in terms of building bridges and creating linkages for knowledge transfer, et cetera, then what we have to protect is mobility, visibility, and the way in which they conduct their liberty in order to offer us choice. We also talked about protection in terms of reinforcement of who we in the cultural community identify as our leaders and elders, who we identify with the power of our esteem and escalate that visibility. Maybe there's a Nobel Prize of that, or some equivalency that amplifies that mobility and architecture of that which we most hold dear in esteem. We want to protect indigenous ways of knowing and indigenous ways of belonging. We felt that linking across an entire ecosystem in art and in education was important for increasing influence and leverage to resourcing access. That a collaborative stance be taken, that we can compete together in order to elevate the capacity of culture and art to transform access to knowledge, but competing against one another because of a diminishing sense of what we have to operate with is counterproductive to our ability to protect culture. How am I doing so far? I'm almost done. And we also talked about acting from the awareness points of our interdependent stances towards the future. Otherwise, the future will continue to be unevenly distributed. So, dimensional and diverse versus dominant and efficient. Authenticity versus constructed outputs for purposes of exploitation and other gain. Institutions as activators and partners versus containers in education and in culture. Porousness without appropriation. And then quickly, not only acting within the practice of interdependence from education and culture and art, but to act within the capacity of our solidarity. A multiplicity of angles in our stories and histories. There cannot be one dominant narrative. And adhering to efficiencies, which are a big pressure point in the West and various other places, cannot be continuously seen as a goal or the principal value because it reinforces thinness. And it was determined long ago that the world was not flat. So then too, our histories and cultures cannot be flat. Artists and the organizations that they value and respect ensure that the world heritage remains round, elliptical, dynamic, and continuously replenishing, not flat, not thin, not exhaustible. We recommend that you author a white paper of the findings so that the knowledge can be used to amplify the perspective at a global level from the art and cultural community that gives legitimacy to what we are engaged in locally because we found much affirmation of practice. It's a tool for us to leverage change, and it's better than hashtags and tweets. So.
Thank you. But all potent ideas. Okay. We use these chairs because it's all about maintaining a balance here. Okay. So next, there was a group that was jointly chaired by Janet Pilato of Zayed University and Wadad Al-Hussein about using the arts to combat extremism. Where is Wadad? Where? Oh, there. I knew you were here.
So our group was tasked with coming up with a solution based on arts and how arts can be used to counter extremism or prevent extremism. So we came up with an idea that we called Crafting the Future. This idea is a mentorship program that uses arts to combat extremism and channel the energy and creativity of youth towards social good. The program uses modern and traditional arts and crafts to engage youth and individuals. It also will be a global, we called, project, which means it will address global issues but contextualize them based on the local context. The program will look at identifying and engaging at-risk youth and then also leveraging former extremists who have been rehabilitated to serve as mentors for those at-risk youths and to share their experiences. They will also engage older generations to share their experiences with youth and to be involved in the program as well. So it will cover the generational gap between youth and maybe the older generation. Some of the program or some of the elements of the program would include creative artwork. So this would include music, arts, culinary arts, and it would also include traditional crafts. So pottery, carpentry, weaving. It would cover all areas of art to be inclusive so that youth that have different interests with relation to art are able to really identify which programs apply to them and what they want to be engaged in. Before we start this mentorship program, we'll do a lot of research on the ground, obviously, to see what needs to be done and in which countries this is needed. We came up with a few in our group based on the expertise we had. So we identified potentially this program would be effective in Saudi Arabia, the Philippines, Tunisia, Morocco, Pakistan, France, and Bahrain. The program and model will obviously differ from different countries, and it will address the local drivers and push and pull factors based on that region. So I realize it's a very comprehensive model that we've outlined. However, we don't anticipate for this organization or this mentorship program to do everything alone. We want to engage organizations and experts and practitioners on the ground that are already doing this work, so individuals like yourself, and engage them to be a part of this mentorship program. So it would be also leveraging those experiences and those talents in those communities. So it doesn't start from scratch. I know it sounds very comprehensive, but it's not from scratch. And we would then develop a brand that this program would fall under in order to engage youth and it be attractive to young people to want to be engaged in. And the funding for this program we see as private and public. So we would sell this to governments by addressing that this would be a social economic. For them, it would be something that would help them because we're building the capacity of youth to be able to be engaged in programs. So we're channeling their energy towards social good, basically. Thank you very, very much.
I want to emphasize that what we're going to do is we're going to take all the suggestions from the Artist Incubator, we're going to take these, and following on Christy's point, we're going to create a white paper of findings of the summit, of ideas from the summit. We will circulate them. And it's not a mission statement for CultureSummit. It is a mission statement for all of us as a community. And some of these ideas will be born elsewhere. At least that's our thought. And some of them, we're not sure where they will grow. We're just sure that each of us individually is committed to these ideas and trying to find a way to cultivate them. The next group was a cultural entrepreneurship group that Noura was the leader on, and I see here that Ribio is going to present, and there he is. All right. In the hardest place for me to possibly get a microphone, but there you go.
Good morning, everybody. صباح الخير كل أنتو. The workshop 7 worked on the theme Cultural Entrepreneurship, training artists to make a difference. We tried to answer to the question, how might we bridge artists and entrepreneurs to have a bigger impact? After discussion, we came up with the recommendation, the only one, to create a global creative impact alliance that will be a worldwide non-profit organization that will bring together artists, creative industries actors, educational institutions, financial investors and technology companies. What will be the idea, what will be the core mission of that worldwide non-profit organization? We have three core missions. The first, to undertake studies on the economic impact of creative sectors, to encourage and strengthen capacities on dialogue between private sector, associations involved in the creative sectors, and on the other side, government. And the last one is to produce toolkits that will be useful to creative entrepreneurs in order to help them to face to their daily activities. And we have been inspired by some initiatives that will probably become partners of that global alliance. We have from the United States, Kiva, Patreon, and from the UK, the Creative Industries Federation, and from the African Culture Fund and the African Creative Economy Conference operated by Artea Network, which is the biggest network of cultural entrepreneurs across Africa. To conclude, CultureSummit is not simply an event, but more a movement. And on our side, we think that the Global Creative Impact Alliance is somehow a response to reach that goal. Thank you very much. Afshok.
And so the final panel, also on the similar subject, by the way, thank you for that, it was extremely thoughtful, also on cultural entrepreneurship, was chaired by Horacio Lencona, and it says here Brendan Seco is going to handle it. You're easier to get to.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. So we started pulling from our individual cultural experiences to understand how we define both culture and entrepreneurship. And looking back, we found that the definition of the cultural entrepreneur or cultural entrepreneurship as a whole was defined in 1982 by a scholar named Paul DiMaggio to describe the cultural creation in Boston, Massachusetts, in the 19th century. And what I can assure you of is our definitions greatly differed from this definition. And so we pulled from our experiences, our backgrounds, our origins, which gave us incredibly broad definitions. And I can tell you that they're less institutionally driven, they're less elitist, they're broader, and they're more enterprising than that definition from 1982. Which was incredibly powerful, as you can imagine. We looked at artists, we looked at cultural producers, cultural facilitators, and entrepreneurs, and we all agreed they share the same thread within. They're bold, they're courageous, they have the capacity to navigate risk and address a gap, a need, an opportunity in the market or in our society. So if you think of this static plane, an entrepreneur or a cultural entrepreneur or an artist can jump into the pool and waken up that static existence. So how can we support and accelerate cultural entrepreneurship? How can we amplify or growth hack culture? What traditional tools have helped traditional entrepreneurs succeed? And we look to models like the lean startup methodology, which has helped tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs succeed in their work. From the lean canvas, which is commonly used, a cultural-centric culture entrepreneurship canvas or methodology could emerge. These can help guide, provide early validation, and a playbook for this community. We also discussed business models and agreed that new business models and entities needed to be created and that a system is better than no system at all. So turning cultural values into actual valuation was something that really resonated, and ways to measure the impact of cultural production. And with conviction, we all believed you cannot improve what you do not measure, and that this measurement mattered significantly to culture. What we wish to contribute to this group is a toolkit, a manifesto, and a support network through hubs, both physical and virtual, to mentor and support the needs of this community from inception all the way to the growth stages of cultural entrepreneurship. These are the resources that we believe will drive progress and expand cultural entrepreneurship globally.
Thank you. So now, you know, Culture Summit, when Noura and Carla and I first thought of it, was kind of an experiment. And we've now gone through a couple. We've had something like 700 or 800 people come through it from 90 countries, artists, public officials, technologists, academics, arts administrators, philanthropists, gallery owners, museum, you know, people from every corner of the place. And a number of themes, you know, have emerged, and they emerged last year and they've been repeated this year, about ways to utilize the community. But one thing that's clear, there is a desire to knit a community together here. There is a desire to bring people together, as you guys have done here, and also to do it elsewhere, and to do it virtually, and to do it in manifold different ways. And so I thought the best place to begin is you've just heard a bunch of perspectives. Maybe you can talk about them, but you know, not in the context of Culture Summit necessarily, maybe just in the context of you're in this business too. And you know, how do you react to it, and what resonates?
I think I just want to thank everybody for their comments. I think one thing that has echoed in my mind since it has been uttered is that this is a cultural movement. It's a lot more than a summit, it's a lot more than a gathering, and we should sustain this movement and grow it in the future. And days like these, where we can bring the minds together, we can bounce ideas off each other, we need a lot more of these things. You know, we've heard today the aspect of education being a major part of the future. We are all doing our part as individuals within our own realms. Specifically talking about the Department of Culture in Abu Dhabi, there's a big focus on educating the future generations. And that education starts with culture. I believe a non-cultured mind is a mind that's kept hostage. And we've heard also from some of the colleagues on how that a mind that's kept hostage from culture can lead to a very difficult and tough path. Extremism has come from a non-cultured mind. That's not the mind of an Arab, and that's not the mind of a Muslim. Actually, the mind of an Arab and a Muslim is a very cultural mind. It's a part of our history, it's a part of our heritage, a part of our culture. Defining that and echoing this education of that is what the future will take the Arab world. So I'm excited to see the next 5 and 10 years on how the effects of that is going to be taking place. We have seen in a very short period of time how that has completely shifted here in the UAE. Culture has been put as a major part of the education curriculum. The government has invested time, money, and effort to make sure it's a part of our curriculum, whether it's in the arts, in the dramas, in the music, in all aspects of culture, even leading to historical culture. And we have seen within the educational system, students' grades get better. We have seen their interaction with their peers in different cultures get better. And I believe they're just making better human beings. And that's the power of culture. We've seen how the development of both national and international museums has created a fantastic movement here on everything we have discussed. So we are doing our part here. Obviously, it's even more important to hear how we can help and how we can get help. And I think these forums, like where we are right now, is a huge educational part from our perspective. I think since I've met some fantastic people in this summit, there are so many ideas that we're already working on how we can help each other. This is just the strength of the Cultural Summit. So a lot more for us to do. In a world that we have seen places take cuts when it comes to the world of culture. We're very lucky that we're not in this world here in the UAE, but where can we help? At the same time, in a world that's going to be moving to a much stronger cultural investment, which is Saudi Arabia, right across the road. The next 10 years are going to be a a fantastic cultural evolution in Saudi Arabia. And I think this will definitely change the landscape in the Arab world. So the times and the futures are very exciting for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Very, very helpful. Saif. I think it works, yes.
Is it on? Did anybody watch Black Panther?
Oh yeah, we've talked about Black Panther a lot here.
You know, I think if you want to talk about a cultural achievement, a most recent cultural achievement, it's Black Panther. It shows you the strength of media. I mean, I watched it the other day, and forgetting about the box office, but it's unbelievable how the cynics, if I want to call it that, said that a Hollywood movie based on African culture with a full cast of African Americans and Africans cannot work. And I think today, which is the third largest in the box office in the history of movie making, so that's a massive achievement. But more than anything, it has been an eye-opener, even though it's a Marvel movie and it's a comic movie. It's just been an eye-opener for the masses who don't understand African culture. And it's maybe allowed them to get on the internet, to get on social media, to learn. So we should take these new mediums that maybe in the past, in the world of culture, we kind of shied away from. Take them and really harness them to our opportunity. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. It's fantastic.
There was you heard it in the distance there, but there was a lot of Wakanda Forever throughout. Yeah, throughout this event.
Thank you. It's kind of awkward speaking after my boss, but you know, I'll
Well,
try.
You can just say, I agree with what he said.
Wouldn't you like me to say that? But thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk in the last summit. Mohamed, I appreciate it. It's been 2 years getting here, and yes, an idea might have started on, let's say, on a piece of paper, but I would like to take a moment first to thank my team at the Department of Culture and Tourism, Rita and everyone, for turning this idea into a reality. Without their help, their support, their unwavering commitment, you wouldn't be where you are today. So just a round of applause for them. Mohamed covered the importance of a lot of what we're doing, especially the summit, and how it will eventually lead to a better world. It is a unique platform today. It is a ray of light in an otherwise dark world. If you'll allow me, I figured I'd like to at least comment on some of the proposals that were given, just through themes, maybe 3 if you'll allow me. I've heard words throughout the 5 or 6 presentations, you know, the preservation of culture and heritage, artists as vessels of communication, the importance of media, the importance of technology, the ability to measure cultural endeavors, and it's true. Some are challenges, some are solutions, and whatnot. I'd like to shed some light of some, cases or examples of things that we are doing at DCT, which could serve as a bed of experiments for anyone who wants to come and try a concept. We have, as you can tell, we have the appetite to sort of try new things to further this cultural agenda, and one of them is the summit. At DCT, we do realize that we have a role, at least in the region, to preserve and protect and increase awareness about culture, to educate and things along these lines. But we do realize that resources are finite, and we do realize that there is a potential to attain economies of scale, because whatever we can do, we can replicate outside this country. And that's why, with direction from Mohamed, we've invested heavily in technology. And we launched a couple of months ago Culture Abu Dhabi, which is a first of its kind cultural sort of a digital platform, and it serves many purposes. Its target audiences are academics, faculty, students, visitors, residents, someone living in the States, wherever it is. It's a resource of information. And it goes 2 ways. One, it feeds you with information, but it also receives. So I heard someone talked about sort of crowdsourcing submissions of heritage and what that. We're already starting that. So we are asking people here to contribute, especially the older generation. So if I'm sitting at home and I want my grandmother to talk about an element of my heritage or culture, I would videotape her and I would submit it. We would moderate, curate the content, and it would go up there. So it's making it easier for me to gather elements of my intangible heritage, digitize it, and increase awareness about it. And I'd like to offer to show whoever is interested, either remotely or if you guys are in town, the team can show you how these things work. So we're making strides, but we will definitely need your support because our aspiration, just like all of you, is global. Culture does not belong to one nation or one person. It's for everyone. So that's kind of on the technology side. On media, media does play an important role in furthering our agenda. I mean, we could, David and Carla and Mohamed and Noura and I can gather everyone into this room. But if our word does not get out there, we failed in a sense. And we did cite, commercial, successful media platforms that have a lot of reach. We talked about youth. Youth today don't watch TV like you and I did when we were kids. Today it's, I don't know, YouTube and online and all these things. So we have to identify what are the channels that are mostly used and how can we force these channels or producers of content to play a role, a public service role. Call it a public service tax. You have a popular show, something that's going to be widely watched by kids, either embed it with elements of culture, heritage, whatever it is, or add some content before it. And it will be an exact replication of what we're trying to do at DCT. We believe that tourism plays an important role in getting culture out. So it's not what people think as well. People think we're only investing in culture to bring tourists in. No, it's also the other way around. We use our tourist platforms to also push our culture out. So at events like Mother of the Nation Festival or something in the Abu Dhabi Classics where we have a lot of people attend or tune in, you will have sessions at the beginning or somewhere, elements where people come covering elements of heritage, culture, arts, whatever it is. Since you have people tuned in for a very popular concept, the tax, metaphorically speaking, that they have to pay is that they have to consume some art content that I'm going to give them at the beginning. So it's also being innovative in your approach. These are some of the comments I was just kind of noting down mentally as I heard from everyone. But I'm very privileged on the behalf of Abu Dhabi and to host Mohamed and I and David and Carla, to host all of you here. And I'm very glad that even in the year of Zaid, which is 2018, this has been a very successful event. It has shown that the values of the late founder can be, shown and displayed and emulated in a lot of the audiences here from all walks of life. And we hope to continue to carry this torch and carry the founder's legacy forward. And one of the most important success factors for that is summits like these: open, tolerant dialogues, and for platforms of exchange. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you'll forgive me, but one of the things that I've learned is most important in my life is to give the last word to Carla.
Well, that's a lot of pressure. I really want to begin first and foremost by thanking our incredible partners at DCT. As someone who is not employed by you, let's say, but from the outside, and I think all of us here are outsiders, we have all benefited so much from, first and foremost, your passion for these issues, and secondly, I would say your generosity, and thirdly, your commitment, because you've certainly led the way not only by showing passion and generosity, by your own example and all of the initiatives that you're bringing here, which of course we've seen through this Culture Summit, but we've also seen with our visit to Louvre Abu Dhabi. So I know I speak for everybody in this room. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. I think I just want to speak to what I've learned on this 2-year journey. First of all, I've learned that truly anything is possible. And that's a very powerful lesson for me as a younger artist, I suppose, because when we spoke of entrepreneurs and artists, well, what do they have in common? And I think it's what we all in this room have in common. It's the capacity to dream, to imagine something bigger and better and brighter for our future. And in building this Culture Summit, I've learned that truly anything is possible, and it's important to dream big. Secondly, I've learned that there are many, many people throughout the world that are equally committed to these issues that we're speaking about here. Everyone in this room, obviously, the people that were with us last year at the Culture Summit, the organizations represented, certainly, and people who have not yet been here. And it's my dream, let's say, to to further reach all of those people and gather this community. And thirdly, if I may be so bold, I think we often don't dare to speak of a word that's rather tabooed in our society. And I don't know that I've heard it spoken of much here at the Culture Summit, but I will be so bold, and that is love. Love means different things to different people, but I think we all share not only a passion, but a love for the world, a love for one another. And I've seen that exemplified here in Abu Dhabi. You mentioned, Saif, the word tolerance, but I have always felt from the people here that it goes beyond just tolerance. It actually goes to respect and acceptance and love for one another as one race, let's say, and that is the human race, the human condition that we spoke of at the Louvre yesterday. So I dare you all to speak more of love and to live in that light. Thank you.
I would only add to those comments gratitude to DCT, gratitude to TCPV, gratitude to my team at TRG, but mostly gratitude to all of you, because we have made you work very hard. The schedule has been relentless, although I think the benefits of it have been really substantial. And because we're seeking a commitment from you. We're not just simply seeking you to sit in the chairs and applaud when the music is over. We want to build a collaboration. Culture Summit is a catalyst. It's not an end in itself. As I said at the very beginning, it's a movement. It's not a destination. And we've had conversations here about events we could do in China, events we could do in Europe, events we could do in Latin America, events we could do in Africa, events, other kinds of things, of platforms that could be built, of collaborations that could be built. Our artists have had conversations about new things they could do together. We've had discussions about alliances that can come out of all of this. And what I really want to thank you for is your commitment to these things in advance. I want to thank you for what you're going to do next, not just what you've done here, what you guys are doing next and really blazing a trail and being one of the most innovative departments of culture and tourism or the like anywhere in the world, because you're leading now. And I think one of the comments of this meeting that you may have missed is that the leadership has changed, that there has been a tectonic shift, that new places are going to drive the debate going forward, and new dialogues. And it's been very enriching to sit in a crowd from 90 different countries, and in every case hear a range of views. But the other thing that's been incredibly enriching, and it speaks to Carla's point, is the consensus around the importance of using the arts in education, using the arts to preserve heritage, using the arts to combat extremism, preserving endangered cultures, collaborating in new ways, using new tools to collaborate. And so this is not an end of an event. It's the beginning of something. It's the beginning of countless collaborations in many different places, in many different forms. And I'm speaking not for these organizations, but for mine at the Rothkopf Group. We are going to begin a number of them right away, podcasts and other kinds of events, and working with you. And I know that Carla's organization has some plans, and I know DCT has some plans, and we know all of you do. Let's work together. It'll make it all easier and better. Now, because this is Culture Summit, we don't end with words. Because it's Culture Summit, we end with art. And I want to leave it to Carla to introduce that. And then after this, we will all go out, and there's an informal lunch you can attend if you would like to attend it, and say goodbye to each other. But for me, thank you very much, and over to you.
Well, thank you, David. Thank you, Mohamed. Thank you, Saif. And I do want to mention also that at lunch, we will have 2 more incredible performances, including a performance from a really fantastic Emirati musicians, so we really hope that you'll be there for that. But now, as we close our time here in this space, I can't think of a more appropriate and incredible artist that can lead us with inspiration forward. Gidon Kremer has, over the past 5 decades, established and sustained a worldwide reputation as one of the most original and compelling artists of his generation. He has appeared on almost every major concert stage as a recitalist with the most celebrated orchestras of Europe and North America. Too many to name here, but certainly I would say every one that you could think of. And he has worked with many of the greatest conductors of the past half century. His repertoire is unusually wide and strikingly varied. It encompasses the full span of classical and romantic masterworks for violin, together with music by such leading 20th and 21st century composers as Berg, Hentz, and Stockhausen. He's also championed the work of living Russian and Eastern European composers and has performed many important new compositions by them, several of which have been dedicated specifically to him. In my opinion, it is fair to say that no other soloist of comparable international stature has done more to promote the cause of contemporary composers and new music for violin than this year's artist in residence, Gidon Kremer. And as we welcome Maestro onto the stage, what an honor. I'd like to tell you what he will play. He will begin with Silvestrov's Serenade, followed by Loboda, Requiem to all suffering people of the Ukraine, and finally Weinberg, 3 Preludes. It's been my pleasure to get to know you, Maestro, and I know as skilled as you are at your artistry and your craft, you also have such a big heart and such a commitment for all of the issues that we've spoken to. It's an honor to welcome you. Thank you.